Oh, please don't mind my dog. He's really quite sweet. Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Santa Martha. She's a 4-star caster and the welfare servant for this year's Christmas event. While freebies like her are always worth getting, Martha in particular has an ace up her sleeve that you might want to take for yourself. So let's see what she's got going on. I'll also be covering Martha's legend in the second portion of this video, so stick around if you want to know more. First up is Martha's home cooking. It's a targeted attack and max HP buff that comes with a 20% battery. Spoilers, Martha operates as a support, so putting this on a teammate would be ideal. But you have the option of casting it on herself, so keep that in the back of your head. The battery's fixed at 20%, so you'd only need to level it for that attack buff. Martha's second skill is Busybody Big Sister. It's an AoE and P-Seal and defense down. Straightforward stuff. Just cast it on the same turn that you intend to pop her Noble Phantasm, and you'll be fine 99% of the time. Thirdly, we have Invitation from Santa Claus. It's a targeted single-turn star absorption buff and star dump. It also charges Martha by 30% in max level, and this happens regardless of who you target. You'll want to level this up all the way for its scaling battery. Between home cooking and invitation, Martha can charge herself by up to 50%, 70% if you also have her a pen skill. While not quite enough to run any combination of CEs and servants that you want, this arrangement gives you a degree of flexibility in team building, so don't be distracted by what you're about to see. Santa Martha's Noble Phantasm is Happy Merry Christmas. It's a non-damaging quick card that dumps 20 stars and grants an attack and special damage buff for your team. The latter is a substantial 50% magnitude and works against demons, divine, and undead enemies. Undead and demon enemies typically don't have health values that would justify running a dedicated buff to kill them. Normally they show up as mid-bosses or trash mobs. Now, the demonic category would include a large number of useful targets, but unfortunately FGO distinguishes between demons and demonic foes. The former is a very narrow category containing 0 servants, unless they finally go and add Maxwell's demon. But that third category, divine, that one hits the jackpot. Powerful divinities are a frequent obstacle in FGO's main story and events. Sky of Darkness, Talalok, Tezcat, Bhima, and Durga are just a few of the big future foes that Martha can give you a leg up against. Though if you want to pick a fight with Talalok, might want to plug her in from the backline. For an example of how useful Martha is, 2024 is going to feature a series of Road to 7 quests that include extremely powerful versions of previous Lost Belt bosses. Canis and Arjuna Altar are just 2 of these fights, where if you want to go fast, Martha is the rocket fuel that'll get you there. Arjuna Altar is the most extreme example, where he shows up with quadruple his original health, and you might think, fuck it, I'll just use the Immortal team and grind him out over a few hours. But these fights? They aren't freeform. You go into your support list looking for a Merlin and, oops, all Karna. Super Recollection quests have the restrictions of the original story fights, and that Karna? He doesn't get scaled up to match Arjuna's increased health. He's just dead weight. So unless you already have Castoria, Merlin, and Morgan/Himiko in your account, you've got to do it the hard way. Or risk running substandard replacements and losing your run an hour in. Arjuna's a one-shot machine, so you need to move fast before he decimates your team. And on top of this, you need Castoria's Noble Phantasm to keep your frontline alive through his second break bar on top of everything else. He gains Invuln Pierce and a full bar, and with Karna occupying the rear, you can't afford to sack your frontline. But doing even the first bar of 1.2 million health is hard. Arjuna has damage resistance that counterbalances some of his Berserker class disadvantage, so you won't hit as hard as you might expect. In this footage, my Estrella struggles to meet the damage check without some pretty unreasonable RNG, but throw Martha in and it suddenly becomes a lot more doable. Still hard as balls, but I'm getting somewhere. The anti-divine buff is a godsend, and if you run up against the divine boss, try working her into your team to see what happens. Odds are you'll be pleased with the results. What you won't be pleased by is the realization that once she pops her Noble Phantasm, she's kinda dead weight. Ideally, Martha setups want to end the fight within 3 turns to avoid re-upping Happy Merry Christmas. That's why I didn't mention her overcharge before. It's just a heal, which doesn't matter since you're aiming to NP on turn 1. Once depleted though, Martha herself becomes an obstacle to a fast clear. To get around this, you'd ideally be running her with a Tauntcraft Essence or the Chaldea Combat Uniform for a fast exit. Martha has between 50 and 70% charge available to herself, but none of the Taunt CEs have starting charge, which creates a challenge if you want it both ways. A 30% charge would make the difference though. Thankfully, our good friend Castoria grants exactly that, and her second skill applies its NP gain effect to your entire frontline, so you can put that on Martha and have her use home cooking on your main attacker instead. So if you've got good a Poster Girl or Outrage, you're in a pretty good spot. Depending on your main attacker's charge availability, you may need to plug in a second Castoria on turn 1 though. But if you don't have a taunt, then your array of 50% craft essences will do just fine. Golden Catches the Carp gives you a bounty of stars, but even the low-cost Dragon's Meridian will get the job done. You might be worried about Happy Merry Christmas being a quick Noble Phantasm, but honestly it's a non-issue long-term. Currently on NA, you want to begin your chains with a Buster card to get its starter damage bonus. But in half a year, that's going to get turned upside down with the introduction of Mighty Chains, which incentivize using all 3 card types to get all 3 starter bonuses, and these activate regardless of your card order. All of a sudden, it's optimal to put a quick card first and a Buster card last for damage. If you don't need your main attacker's NP or Brave Chain on turn 1, Martha can occupy the quick slot and you follow up with your main attacker's arts and Buster cards. If they have an Arts Noble Phantasm, that also works out quite well. So don't be afraid to run Martha in Arts and Buster teams. She might be a quick servant in a loose technical sense, but she has zero loyalty to the card type. You can run her with anyone you see fit, even if they already have their own attack and crit tools. Now the one thing that sucks about Martha has nothing to do with her skill set, but rather the state of FGO itself. One of the optimal ways to run Martha is as an esports servant, keeping her at level 60 with 0 health foes. This means you get full access to her skill set while keeping her as fragile as possible. The reason for this is that if you put a taunt CE on someone, you very much want them to bite it. This is doubly important with Outrage since it only works for a single turn, so you're on the clock. A fully leveled and foed Martha would be more likely to survive. This adds RNG to your run and that's never fun. In the past, you'd get around this by grabbing another set of Marthas from the rerun and going the other route with them. But Losangle really fucked up with their rerun policy. Redundant copies of Welfare Servants let you experiment with esports strategies, but you don't have that buffer anymore. And nowhere do you feel the pain of this more than with Martha. Between this and the change to how Welfare NP copies work, you'll have to make a choice between a full power Martha and an esports Martha. Esports is technically optimal, but it never feels good to have your only copy of a servant be one with gimped stats. But regardless of which path you take, make sure it's one where you get Martha in the first place. She operates mostly in the anti-divine niche, but divine bosses and super bosses come up frequently in FGO. If you miss out now, you're gonna feel it in the future, 100%. Now let's move on to Martha's legend. Fair warning as usual that I'm not a proper historian or mythologist, just a nerd. With that said, Martha's story takes us to the Roman province of Judea in the ancient Near East. She lived with her siblings, Mary and Lazarus, in a small village called Bethany just outside of Jerusalem. That's why you see Martha referred to as Martha of Bethany whenever she's not called Saint Martha. Now the fact that these adult siblings lived with each other was apparently weird for the times, since they'd have all been expected to get married and form their own households by that point. Maybe they didn't get along so well with the other villagers. But Martha had bigger fish to fry. One day she was entertaining a particular guest. Let's call him JC. Martha was running around to and fro, getting a massive feast and prepping her house in order to be a good host. But there's Mary just chatting up the guest, not lifting a finger to help. So Martha pops in and goes, "You, gonna make me do all this myself? Come on, JC, tell Mary to get off her ass and help me." But JC is like, "You gotta relax, Martha. You're fretting about a lot of things, but Mary's got the right of it." The implication was that while Martha was obsessed about being a good host, praiseworthy to a degree, she lost sight of something else important, spending time with her guest and engaging in contemplation with him. Sometime later, Lazarus falls deathly ill, and the siblings send for JC so he can come and help. But JC is delayed and waylaid, and before he gets back to Bethany, Lazarus dies. So then Martha sets out from her home and meets JC, and she says, "My brother wouldn't have died if you were there, but even now I know that if you ask for something, it will be yours." Martha had just asked for her brother's life back. Reading between the lines, JC replies, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha is like, "In the final judgment, you mean?" JC then says, cryptically, "I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this?" Without missing a beat, Martha says, "Of course." By this point in time, she had absolute faith in JC and his abilities. They then head to Lazarus' tomb, and JC orders the stone blocking its entrance to be removed. Martha's like, "He's been in there a while. It's gonna stink." But the stone is indeed removed, and out comes Lazarus, still wrapped in bandages. Everyone is absolutely stunned, and they just stand there until JC is like, "Yo, this guy's wrapped up like a mummy, someone cut him loose." Shock of shocks, JC was Jesus Christ. I'm sure you're familiar with where his story goes. The lot of early Christians was an unhappy one, and many, including Martha and her siblings, were driven from Judea in the years that followed. The trio ended up putting down roots in Gaul, classical France. Martha was traveling one day when she heard about a great and terrible creature, a dragon with a turtle's shell and a lion's head, the Tarrasque. With blade-like teeth, it feasted on the locals who could do nothing against it. Well, this couldn't stand, so Martha confronted the beast, waved the cross in its face, splashed it with holy water, and tied a cloth around its neck to act as a leash. She then led it around, and supposedly the townsfolk took their vengeance upon it. But I don't know, would you fuck with Martha's new pet? I showed this image at the start, but I just can't get enough of it. Tarrasque is eating a guy like a third its size, so it's gotta be pretty big, right? But then you have Martha just towering over them all. Maybe she's big to show her importance, but I get a kick out of the idea that she just ran around with Final Fantasy boss proportions. But through her deeds and devotion, Martha became revered as a saint, and she's the patron of domestics everywhere. Chefs, homemakers, waiters, you name it. And she even has a feast day, but it's nowhere near December. July 29th, apparently. Thanks for watching. Like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more, and come watch me at twitch.tv/Finotaisen where I stream at 3 p.m. Pacific time. Normally it's Friday through Sunday, but December is more of a Wednesday through Sunday arrangement for me. So stop on by and hang out. See you there.